People say hospitals never sleep, that there's always someone awake, a nurse walking the halls, a monitor beeping, a patient breathing in the dark. But this hospital had a room that woke up only at night. During the day, it looked normal. Clean walls, white light, nothing strange. Patients walked past it without stopping. Doctors passed it like it didn't exist. But when the sun went down, no one wanted to say its name. Night staff avoided the hallway. Nurses slowed their steps without knowing why. The watchman checked the door again and again and again. Not because it opened, but because he was afraid it might. No patient was ever assigned there. No files mentioned it. No numbers were written on the door. And the strangest part wasn't the silence. It was the feeling that the room was listening. Because every night, at exactly the same hour, something inside that room seemed to notice that the hospital was finally quiet. And on the night this story takes place, someone walked into that room without knowing why no one else ever did. That was the night the hospital almost lost a nurse. In the daylight, the hospital felt safe. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. The floors shined. The walls smelled like disinfectant and clean air. Everything looked exactly how a hospital should look. Patients talked quietly in their beds. Doctors moved with purpose. Nurses laughed near the desk, sharing small stories to pass the time. In the room, it looked normal. Just another closed door at the end of a long hallway. No warning signs. No locks. No reason to be afraid. People walked past it every day. Stretchers rolled by. Cleaning carts brushed against the wall beside it. Nothing ever happened. But if you paid close attention, you would notice something strange. No one ever stopped in front of that door. Staff slowed down near it, then sped up again. Their voices dropped without them realizing it. Their eyes avoided the handle. Even during the busiest hours, that part of the hallway felt empty. Not unused, not forgotten. Empty in a way that felt deliberate, like the hospital itself was pretending the room wasn't there. And maybe during the day, the room agreed to stay quiet, because whatever lived in that place only seemed to breathe. After the lights went low, and the hospital stopped watching, night didn't arrive suddenly in that hospital. It crept in. The daylight faded from the windows. The halls grew longer. Sounds carried farther than they should have. Machines hummed softer, but somehow louder at the same time. By the time the night shift began, the hospital felt different, older, like the walls were holding their breath. The same hallway that felt harmless during the day now felt narrow, almost closing in. Lights flickered for just a second longer than normal. Shadows stretched where they didn't belong. And the room at the end of the hall, no one looked directly at it anymore. The watchman slowed his steps every time he passed it. He never stood in front of the door. He always checked it from a distance. Other nurses found excuses to walk the long way around, not because they were told to, but because their bodies refused to go near it. No one said anything. That was the rule. If you didn't talk about it, the night passed faster. But sometimes, when the hospital went completely quiet, people swore they could hear something from that hallway. Not a voice, not a cry, just a soft sound, like a breath being held too long. And every night, around the same hour, the feeling returned. The feeling that the room was no longer empty. The feeling that it was awake. There were rules on the night shift, not written anywhere, not part of any training, but everyone followed them. No one was ever assigned to that hallway. If a task came close, someone else quietly took it. If a cart stopped near the door, it was moved immediately. The watchman checked the corridor more than any other part of the hospital, not to guard it, to make sure it stayed closed. He never touched the handle. He never leaned too close. Once, a new intern asked why the lights near that hallway were always brighter. No one answered. Another time, a nurse joked about what would happen if someone went inside. The laughter stopped too quickly. People avoided standing with their backs to that door. They avoided whispering near it. They avoided even pointing at it, because pointing felt dangerous. At exactly one point every night, the hallway fell silent. No footsteps, no machines, no voices over the intercom, just stillness. And in that stillness, everyone felt it. A pressure in the chest, a tightness behind the eyes, a sense that something unseen was waiting. The rule was simple. If the room stayed closed, the hospital stayed safe, and no one wanted to be the reason that rule was broken. The new nurse arrived on a Monday morning. She was calm, focused, the kind of person who believed fear usually had a reason, and that reasons could be explained. This was her first real hospital job. She wore her uniform neatly. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice stayed steady. To her, the hospital felt normal, busy, tiring, A place where people came to heal, not to be afraid. She noticed the long hallways, the constant beeping, the way time seemed to stretch during quiet moments. But she didn't notice anything wrong. Not at first. Senior nurses showed her around. Patient rooms, supply closets, emergency exits. They skipped one hallway. Not obviously, not deliberately. They just turned early. The new nurse assumed it was under renovation or unused. Hospitals had plenty of closed rooms. Later that day, while organizing files, she glanced down the hall and saw the door. Plain, white, no number. She felt something she couldn't explain. A brief pause in her thoughts. Like her mind hesitated before moving on. She shook it off. Long shifts did that to people. By the time her name was added to the night schedule, she still didn't know that the room had already noticed her. The warnings didn't sound like warnings. They sounded like jokes. During a short break, one of the older nurses smiled at her and said, "Just stick to your assigned floors at night. This place gets weird when it's quiet." Another nurse laughed and added, "Yeah, the hospital doesn't like newcomers after midnight." They all laughed, but the laughter didn't reach their eyes. The new nurse smiled back, unsure how to respond. She assumed it was just night shift humor, a way people dealt with long hours and exhaustion. Still, she noticed something. Whenever she asked questions about certain hallways, answers became vague. "Oh, that area is usually empty. Nothing important down there. You won't need to worry about it." No one ever said the room's name. No one ever explained why it stayed closed. One nurse started to say something once, then stopped herself. Her face changed. Her voice lowered. "Just don't wander at night," she said. "That's all." As the shift went on, the new nurse felt a quiet distance forming around her. Not unkind, not hostile, protective. Like the others knew something. They hoped she would never have to learn. And somewhere down the hall, behind a door without a number, something waited patiently for her first night to begin. Her first night shift began quietly, too quietly. The hospital lights dimmed to a softer glow. Footsteps echoed longer than before. Even the air felt heavier, harder to breathe. She checked patient charts, adjusted 4 lines, moved from room to room, following routine. Everything she had learned still applied, but the hospital didn't feel the same. Clocks seemed slower. Hallways felt longer. Every sound stood out. A cart rolling, a distant cough, a door closing far away. Around midnight, she noticed something odd. The nurse's station grew tense. Voices lowered. Movements became careful. The watchman passed by twice within minutes, his eyes fixed on the far hallway. She followed his gaze. The corridor at the end was brighter than the others. Too bright for that hour. She felt a pull she didn't understand. Not curiosity, not fear. Responsibility. Her pager buzzed softly. A routine alert. A task that needed to be handled. The location listed was near the end of the hall. She hesitated only for a second. Then she picked up her clipboard and started walking toward the place. Everyone else seemed desperate to avoid. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't curiosity. It was just a simple mistake. A patient needed a form signed. A supply needed checking. A routine task. Nothing dangerous, or so she thought. She walked down the long, dim hallway. Her shoes clicked softly on the polished floor. Each step sounded louder than it should have, as if the silence itself was listening. The door appeared at the end. Plain, white, no number, no warning. She paused for a fraction of a second, a small, nagging feeling brushing the back of her mind. Then she told herself it was just nerves. It was a new job, first night, nothing unusual. She stepped closer, touched the handle. The moment her hand made contact, the air changed. Not a sound, not a flicker of light, just stillness. She pushed the door open, and the hallway behind her seemed to vanish. The door swung shut, and then it clicked, locked. No jiggling of the handle helped. No amount of shaking would budge it. And in the sudden silence, she realized something horrifying. She was no longer outside the room. She was inside it, and it was waiting. The mistake was not that she had entered. The mistake was thinking she could leave. The room looked normal. Sterile walls, a faint smell of cleaning solution, empty chairs, a table pushed to the side. Nothing seemed out of place, but it felt wrong. The air was colder than the hallway had been. Heavy, thick, like it was pressing against her chest. Her footsteps made no sound, but her own breathing felt loud, intrusive, like the room was listening. She took a step forward. Something shifted. A chair that had been perfectly aligned now faced the corner, just slightly. She could swear it had moved on its own. The shadows in the corners were sharper than shadows should be. They seemed to lean toward her. Not just blackness, intention. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting a brief shadow across the wall. And for a heartbeat, she saw something move, something that wasn't her own shadow. Her heart sped up. A chill ran down her spine. But when she blinked, the room was empty. Empty, yet aware. Every small sound she made, a cough, a shuffle, even the beat of her own heart, seemed amplified. Every corner seemed just a little too dark. Every object slightly off. She whispered, "Hello." No answer, not even a breath. But she wasn't alone. The room had noticed her. It was awake, and it had been waiting. The mistake was already growing, and the room was patient. Patient enough to watch her unravel. The first sound was subtle, a soft tapping, like fingernails on the table. She froze, staring at the spot. Nothing was there. The tapping grew louder, irregular, unpredictable. Her pulse raced. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The room seemed to shift around her. The walls stretched just slightly. The light flickered, casting shapes that didn't match any furniture. Her own reflection in a small window lagged behind her movements. Like a delayed echo, she tried the handle again. Locked. Then the whispers started. Not words, not language, just low, urgent murmurs. Underneath them, something deeper, a vibration in the air, like the room itself was breathing, watching, judging. The objects moved. A pen rolled across the table on its own. A chair scraped across the floor, stopping right at the corner where the shadows were the darkest. Her mind raced. Rational explanations, nothing fit. She was exhausted, yes, but this wasn't exhaustion. This was something else. The room seemed to respond to her fear. Every heartbeat echoed back at her. Every step she took, every small movement, shifted the room in ways that were impossible. It wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it was learning her panic, learning her limits. She whispered again, "Please, someone." The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. It had already claimed her attention, and it wasn't finished. Her hands shook. Her breathing came in short, sharp bursts. Every instinct screamed to run, but the door wouldn't open. The room was closing in, not physically, but in every other way that mattered. The air felt thick, heavy, like it weighed on her lungs. Shadows clung to the corners, writhing just enough to suggest movement. Every object that had been still now seemed to twitch, responding to her fear. And then, the memories came, not hers. Images of people she had never met. Whispers of voices that didn't belong to anyone she knew. A child's cry, a man's scream, a nurse, maybe herself, pleading for help. The room remembered. The room kept score. Her reflection in the window stared back, but it wasn't her. Eyes wider, mouth twitching, a silent scream that didn't exist in reality. Her knees buckled. Her mind scrambled for logic. This isn't real. It's just a room. But every sound she made was echoed, distorted. Every movement seemed anticipated. Every thought felt visible, audible. She pounded on the door. "Help! Somebody!" Nothing answered. And in that silence, the room communicated perfectly. A subtle vibration in the floor, a pressure behind her back, the feeling that it was measuring her, judging her, deciding how much it could take, how much it could bend her mind. Her breaking point came not in screams or sobs, but in realization. She wasn't just trapped. She was inside something that had been waiting for her. And it was patient, too patient. And now, it wanted her to know that it could wait forever. Outside the room, the night was unervingly quiet. The watchman had been checking the hallways for hours, but something made him pause near that door. A soft, irregular sound, like scratching, echoed faintly. It didn't belong to any patient, any machine, any person he knew. He called for backup. Other staff gathered, hesitant, whispering. No one wanted to be near that hallway. No one wanted to acknowledge what they were hearing. And then came the knocking. Not her knocking, not human. A sharp, frantic pounding from inside the room, echoing like metal on metal. The staff froze. The watchman raised his flashlight. He called out, "Open the door." "It's okay." No answer. The pounding continued. Faster, louder, frantic, desperate. Finally, the staff forced the door. It took every ounce of strength. The lock gave way with a loud snap. The nurse stumbled out, her uniform disheveled, her hair matted, eyes wide, unseeing at first, her body trembling uncontrollably. She ran, down the hallway, past the stations, past the elevators. Her breaths ripped from her lungs. Her hands clawed at the walls as if they could push her forward faster. The staff followed cautiously. No one spoke. No one asked. She didn't stop until she was in the bright, safe lights of the nurse's station, until she could no longer hear the soft hum behind her. The door closed behind her. Normal, silent, empty. But she knew the room hadn't changed. It had one, and it would be waiting. even when no one was looking, even when the hospital seemed quiet, even when the lights were on, because that night, she had walked into something alive, and it had let her leave for now. The next morning, the hospital went back to its usual rhythm. The sun poured through the windows. Patients whispered, nurses moved with purpose, and the machines hummed their normal, steady tune. But something had changed. The new nurse didn't return for her next night shift. She called once, hesitant, quiet, but never explained what had happened. Her belongings were packed, her locker empty. Some said she resigned. Some whispered she had disappeared. The door at the end of the hallway looked ordinary again. Clean, white, no number. Nothing to hint at the terror it had held. Staff avoided it, naturally. Some said it was out of respect. Others said it was fear. But the quietest, most chilling truth was this. When the door finally closed behind her, the room didn't remain empty. Not really. Something had left with her. Or something had stayed behind, shaped like her. And in the quiet of the night, if you walked that hallway slowly, you could feel it. Watching, waiting, patient. Because some doors don't just close. Some doors remember. And some never let go.